All right, fans, here we go once again, back in the studio for Xtreme Memories, right here on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Thank you for liking, for sharing, for commenting, and especially subscribing. The more subscribers we get, the more great content we can bring to you. On the road, in the studio, back in the studio, this time with one of the members of the Asylum, but unofficially. We're going to explain what I mean by that. He was right under the wing of Supreme himself. We talk a lot about the late, great Supreme Lester, who passed away way too soon. So the training of XPW, this guy was known as Lone Star, Evil Lone Star, or You Suicide. The guy's name is Andre. He goes back all the way to the beginning of the days in the 1990s of XPW. Talks all about what he's doing now, how he feels looking back. Great catching up with him on this episode of Xtreme Memories. All right, this once again, Xtreme Memories. My guest, Andre Verdun. How do you pronounce that?
Verdun.
Verdun. But most people remember as oh my gosh, there's Lone Star, there's Evil Lone Star, there's You Suicide. You name it.
Yeah.
But back in the day, as far as your involvement in XPW, it was just Andre. So you were that's where you got your start. And man, we'll talk all about that because I remember, man, you were crazy. We were all crazy in our own way.
We were all crazy.
But you had an extra. Someone sprinkled a little extra on you. I gotta say, man, because you were living. You're originally from Ventura, California. We did shows at the Ventura Theater. And
do you remember where you guys were at before the Ventura Theater?
Oh well, yeah, we did. Yeah, that's true. We did the Band in Ventura
Ventura. That was the first time I met you at that show.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. That sounds about right. And it didn't take long for you to find your way into XPW after that. Yeah, because I remember guys like Low-Key Steve, Zach, and a lot of the other guys that ended up training. But that's how it was in the beginning, and we all did the ring and all that stuff. And
do you know how I got myself into XPW? It was almost like an accident.
Okay.
So there was a guy, I'm trying to think of his name, who was like a indie film editor. He was doing like indie films, and he got a gig somehow taping the Ventura shows. Okay. And I ran into him completely separate from XPW through the backyard wrestling that I was doing. And he wanted to make a sizzle reel for a potential backyard wrestling videotape that he thought he could sell and make some money on. So I brought him my video, and I went to his I think it was in Camarillo. Okay. He had like a little office with all these computers set up, and we sat there all night one night, him cutting up videos and putting together the sizzle reel, and him and I chatting. And then he said, I'm going to take this down to my buddy. He runs this company called XPW. I'm like, fucking XPW. I go to all their shows. I love XPW. And so apparently he brought the video, showed it to Rob, and then Rob told him, like, bring this cocksucker down here. And then so, I drove down there one night and sat around for about 5 or 6 hours waiting to talk to Rob. And that's kind of when I met Supreme for the first time, not as a fan, and Rob and all that. So that's actually how I got in. It was kind of like almost by happenstance.
Yeah, it's small world, man. That's crazy. And here you had to like the 6 degrees of separation, but it was the same guy that was like, you could have. It seems as if you could have avoided all those middle steps because the guy was there. You were at the show, but that's how it works sometimes. And so all right, so yeah, and then we moved to the Ventura Theater because we were banned
from Ventura.
And we were, and so
I think it was Lizzie Borden that got his band, though, right? It
Yeah,
wasn't even the blood and the violence. It was like her being
right.
like too sexy.
That's right. That's right. And that wouldn't be the last time there would be controversy with the girls and all that. But so we went to the Ventura Theater, which is more proper downtown Ventura. Um, and everyone knows about the Ventura Theater. A lot of very historic events, musicians have gone through there, still do.
Yeah.
And so we were there, and you know, we're there doing a job, but when you have all your friends from like high school and college, whatever it was, that are like hanging in the parking lot, like, okay, this is fun, man. Like, I'll have to admit, like, it because I think I'm a few years older than you, and it like threw me back. Well, this being in that world, but if you look at those Ventura shows, you were so wild in the crowd, and it reminded me of me. Like, I have been in WWE back in the day. Like, as a kid, I was there, right, doing all that. Like, we all are cut from a very similar cloth that,
Yeah.
that end up in wrestling, right? So, and we all have our own unique way of doing whatever we're doing the same thing about. Um, but no, there was a element that you brought of excitement and then you transition to you're part of it. You want to be a part of it. When did you kind of figure out that you wanted to actually wrestle? When did you know that in your life?
Oh, I mean, I was really young. I clearly remember like watching WrestleMania 5 and already talking about like this is what I'm going to do when I grow up in 1980. Oh, even what 80
89.
89.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would have been 8 years old at the time, and there was like from the time that I was very young, and to the time that I actually started training, there was like no other path for me. It wasn't really until I got a few years into wrestling that I started getting interested in like things outside of wrestling. But I was pretty singular focused. Uh, my days like in middle school would be to go to school, come home, watch videos until it was wrestling tapes. I had like a massive collection of wrestling videos, and so it was uh, like really the what people knew me for. If you knew me before high school, it was just about wrestling. When I got into high school, I started getting more interested in like punk rock music and a little bit more interested in politics. And that's a lot of the people that we used to bring to the Ventura Theater because the Ventura Theater is a historic, you know, first when I saw Social Distortion, Strung Out, a lot of really good punk bands, and so a lot of the people that I met were from those shows, and then others were just friends from high school that weren't really wrestling fans, but they loved the backyard wrestling, the
Right.
crazy, stuff we were doing there, and so when I started like just forcing everyone to go, and I should say forcing, but like cajoling people to go to the XPW shows, it felt a lot like the wild and crazy things that we were doing. And I'm not trying to say, oh, it was like backyard wrestling. I'm talking about the energy,
Right. Right.
the craziness of it, the fact that when you sat there, you didn't really, when you go to like a pristine wrestling show, like you enjoy it for what it is, but when you go to like an XPW show and other shows that fit that genre, it's like you have this like feeling in your stomach, like you really like butterflies, like you're really not sure what's going to happen. You're not sure if someone's going to die. You're not sure if someone's going to get there, and you're not sure someone's going to come in the crowd and punch out a fan. I mean, it almost feels like that could happen.
Yeah.
And so like that's the energy that, and again, it's a lot like going to some of the punk rock shows where you see people doing crazy things. I remember watching Mike Nez jump off a stage and drop kick a guy in the audience. And it felt like that could happen. And I think that
Right.
that's what really captivated people. It wasn't just the fact that they had, at the time, I think some of the best, no, for sure the best wrestling in Southern California, but it was also like the energy that
Yeah.
the XPW shows would bring,
Right.
which was like the thing that the energy that like anything really could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so it kind of fit your life at the time. And I remember meeting you, seeing you, even those days, and I'm just like, wow, this kid just totally is doing what he's supposed to be doing right now. And I remember, and you know what I mean? Like I remember seeing that and thinking that, and knowing that, and then so as far as like XPW and all that coming into your life and this your energy, like you said, yeah, I remember all that. So what at that point you talked to Rob and you basically explained how it was when you were a kid, when you first started watching wrestling, when you knew you wanted to be a wrestler. Now the training starts, right? So you're in there with guys we've had on the show already, through that have come in and out of the asylum. Um, so you're in the asylum, the pro wrestling training center, and of course this means it's not just training. You're helping, you're doing stuff, setting up the shows, all that, and which was all supposed to. We all did, right?
Yeah.
But now, how did what did when the training started? Was it something that you expected? Who was your trainer? Was it easier? Was it harder? Was it exactly how you expected? And how was your initial experience as a member of the asylum?
So my trainer was Supreme. And we know we just recently lost him, and of course that was really hard for me and a lot of people that knew him
Yeah,
because Supreme was just such an incredible person.
yeah,
And I'm not talking about Supreme the wrestler or
right.
Supreme
Yes, yeah,
the trainer. I'm talking about Supreme the person,
yeah,
and he was a major. I mean, he's the reason why I got trained. And I'll tell you a story in a minute that he used to love hearing me tell. And uh, but Dynamite D was a part of that. Joey Chaos obviously was a part of that. Homeless Jimmy was a part of that. There was a couple. Oh, Uncle Jess. I
right,
think he was civil in
yeah,
XPW. I mean, those are the guys who really kind of uh, allowed me to Rob Black as well, who, I don't talk to Rob Black anymore. I just thought that I wouldn't talk to him. It's just our lives have gone separate directions.
yeah,
But, a lot of people, could say a lot of different things about Rob Black, but, Rob Black allowed me to live out my dream. And so you can never hate somebody
yeah,
that, not that I would otherwise, but I'm just saying that these are people that in my eyes, hold a very special place. Uh,
right,
Separate and apart from everything else that they may have done, but because they really did allow a kid who was mocked all through elementary school for just absolutely loving pro wrestling, and by the time I got to high school, it was the end thing. So
yeah,
it probably elevated my status that I was known for being so involved in wrestling. But these are the guys that actually allowed me to walk through the door and live out that dream. Um, Before I was actually began my training, I got a lot of notoriety for the backyard wrestling that we were doing.
right,
And so I made an appearance on 2020, and then that kind of well, actually, it started off with a front page newspaper or article, the Ventura Star, the newspaper there. I got the front page, like 6 bloody pictures of us doing the backyard wrestling matches,
right,
and then that kind of led to a bunch of national exposure, and that actually I think is, if I recall, is what actually interests the I can't remember the guy's name that ended up wanting to do the sizzle reel, which ended up getting me into XPW in the first place. But uh, apparently Rob saw that video and thought, well, this guy, he's an idiot. He's crazy. That's the kind of guy that probably belongs in pro wrestling. I'm just assuming that's what he was thinking.
yeah,
So he kind of sent word that I should come down. And so I walk in the office, and there's so the office, as is set up. There's like Rob's office way in the back. Him and Byron had their offices in there. Then there was a warehouse where they would house all their videos, not the wrestling videos, the other business. And then there was like a chain link fence that separated the warehouse where they made a little space for the ring.
yeah,
And then there's another room that kind of like was off to both of those other, you could walk into Rob's room from this other, I guess it's not really a conference room, but it's like a big office space where you used to
Yeah.
film, I think, the TV show. And then you can also walk into the wrestling ring room from another door. And so we were sitting there, me and my friend, uh, literally for 4 or 5 hours while all these wrestlers that we knew that we were watching and we're walking through, and we're trying not to mark out because we kind of know that we shouldn't. And so we're, you know, saying hi or whatever, but not trying to engage in any conversation, not trying to offend anybody. And probably uh, much more than I had realized even at the time. Uh, Being involved in the backyard wrestling and getting all that notoriety really wasn't. It got me there, but it also uh, demonized me for years, especially because I would never denounce or
Mm,
there's a lot of people that I used to wrestle with that broke into the local scene that would completely deny they were ever in backyard wrestling. I'm just like, what are you talking
right.
about? I have videos of us wrestling. uh, but we were not liked and we weren't wanted there. And when it kind of got around who we were and what we were doing there, I could hear the chatter
Mm,
like, fuck these guys, why are they here? Rob better not be thinking that they're gonna like join us.
right.
And I remember them having this meeting, and obviously I don't know the faces because I wasn't in the room, but I could hear through the door the whole conversation, and everyone's like standing up and cutting promos on Raw Black about fuck these guys. I'm not going to put over some backyard, what they call it, yard tard. Uh, and I remember like after like 45 minutes, I look at my friends like, I think we should just leave. Like, I don't think that this is going to work out well for us. This is like really uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden I hear someone stand up and like, I don't know what the fuck your guys' problem is. Like, somebody wants to come here and learn how to wrestle. Like, you're not going to give them
Yeah.
an opportunity. Like,
Yeah.
this is all of us. You're telling me you fuckers didn't go in your, are we allowed to cuss in this program?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Uh,
you.
uh, to do this, he's like, and quite frankly, half of you motherfuckers didn't want us here. He
Right.
says, so Rob, I'll train him. And I didn't know who that person was, but I heard the voice. And so I was thinking, well, maybe we'll stay and see, what happens. And turned out the person who was yelling, screaming, and cussing and taking up for me was Supreme.
Yeah.
And so everyone gets up and walks out, and I'm half asleep. And then I think it was Kevin, and maybe then you. I don't remember. Somebody came and said, "Hey, Rob wants to see you."
Hmm.
So I got up and walked into Rob's office, and it was just Rob in his desk, and opposite Rob was Supreme, and Joey may have been there too. And they had another chair empty, and they asked me to sit down, and Rob basically said, I've seen your videos. I see that you really want to be a pro wrestler. I also see you don't know anything about how to do it right. And so we want to bring you here. We want to train you. What we're going to ask in return is for you to, do a ring crew. We're going to ask for you to come to all the shows and do security, whatever we needed you to
Right.
do. Uh, but in exchange, we'll train you. And I remember Supreme looked at me and said, "And I'm willing to train you if that's okay with you." And I'm like, "If that's okay, I'll cut off my arm in exchange if that's what you need. Yeah, that's okay with me."
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized who it was that was, sticking up for us. And, from that day to this day, I would have died for that man, and
Yeah.
Joey too, because Chaos was, I'm not sure that he would have volunteered, but he went along because Supreme and Chaos are one and the same almost. And
Right.
uh, but from that day forward, he always treated me so well, and so those two guys, I would kill or die for them. And it's not, again, I don't have relationships with them. I don't see them or talk to them except for, very seldom, but they just carry such a special place in my heart for, what they did for me. So that's initially how I broke in. And then
Yeah.
from there, it was, you asked if it was easier or harder than, I
Yeah.
expected. I thought that, I knew that there'd be some learning. But I didn't really expect it to be a very, you know, difficult process from a pain standpoint, because I always consider myself to be a really tough guy. I used to fight
Yeah.
a lot. I used to
Yeah.
fight for fun. Used to mosh pit, right? It was the hardest thing I've ever did. And part of that, and I don't know if if Supreme took that uh, path with me because he wanted to prove to himself that I was
Mm,
worth his time, or prove to me that how hard it was. But I remember that I get in the ring with Supreme the very first day we're training, and he walks up and he punches me in the face. And I'm not talking about a work punch. I'm talking about I literally like lost 10 pounds because I could not eat for days after that.
wow.
And then he just threw me, didn't tell me how to run the ropes, didn't tell me how to take a fall, didn't tell me how to take a clothesline, just throws me into the ropes and clotheslines the shit out of me. And then does it 15 or 20 times, just clotheslines. I don't know how to fall. I'm getting the wind knocked out of me. Um, and I'm thinking after 15 or 20 minutes of this, maybe, maybe this isn't what I want to do. I mean, I'm telling you, if I really, 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 really did not want to do it, I would have walked, because I think most people would have. I mean, he was
Yeah.
just beating the shit out of me. And I don't know how it felt like it went hours. It probably didn't go all that long. I remember Raw Black walking out one day, or at one point, out of his office through the area where the wrestling ring that was at towards the other hall. And he looks up and says, "This guy can jump off a fucking roof, but he can't take a fucking clothesline. What a pussy." Uh,
Yeah.
and that's I guess Rob Black's way of encouraging people to, like, toughen up.
Right, right, right.
I remember one day when I got hurt doing a backyard wrestling thing, and uh, Rob Black's, you were there, and Rob Black said something like, "Hey, you fucking asshole, don't get hurt again." And he walks off. You look at me and you said, "God, he really likes you,"
Yeah, 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 yeah.
because that's Rob Black being nice, right?
Right. That's right, man. That's right.
So yeah, after however long that was, he looks at me and says, "You still want to do this?" And I said, "Fuck yeah, I do." And he said, "I'll see you next week and I'll teach you how to wrestle." And
Awesome.
so I got in my car. I sat there for probably an hour trying to, like, get the energy to turn the car on. And I drove home, and then, every single Tuesday for at least a year or two, I
Yeah,
was down there at the studios, training with, the list of guys that I just gave you. Johnny Webb was there a few times too, and there
right.
was a couple people that were here and there, but Supreme and Chaos every week. Uh, and so I was not. I'll make this point clear. I was not part of the XPW Asylum, because that was being taught
Oh,
by
right.
by
D and
uh,
Steel.
yeah, Steele, and he made it very clear that because I recognized his voice. His voice is
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
it stands out, and I
Yeah.
remember that night him saying, "Rob, I won't train him.
Right.
So
Right.
if you can't find someone else to train him, send him home." And
Yeah.
I think that that's when Supreme stood up and said, "I'll train him."
Okay. Okay. So
So
that kind of clarifies my remembering of these, because you, the asylum, and all the guys that were in the asylum, there was like a cog in the machine kind of missing when I was trying to remember all this. You were there, but you kind of weren't there. But yeah. So thank you, because it's like, wait a minute, he wasn't in the asylum, but he was in the asylum. So
yeah,
thank you.
I was there, but it was weird because, like, I wasn't part of the group. Like, I wasn't part
Yeah.
of the in crowd. Like, all the guys, and a lot of them became dear friends of mine after I left XPW.
Right.
But it was like when I was uh, putting up the ring, taking the ring down, I really didn't interact with those guys. They kind of stuck to themselves, and I stuck to myself. And then the rule Supreme had was, don't say anything unless someone says anything to you. Like,
Right.
don't even say hi to people. You come in the locker room, you sit down, and
Yeah.
him and I just, interacted and talked all the time. He taught me, not just in the ring at training, but even at the wrestling shows. I mean, like, he'd sit, I'd go, he'll go over his matches with me. He'd teach me little tricks, psychology, all that stuff we would talk about in the locker room. But the rule was I was never allowed to talk to anyone unless they talked to me first. Now that kind of got lifted as time went on, and I
Right.
kind of got more and more accepted. But really, I was never really, like, integrated into the XW locker room, other than the fact
Yeah.
that I had relationships with particular people, and I certainly was not integrated or accepted as part of the Asylum group. That's just
Interesting. Because I remember, I seem to remember, like, there's some days you'd be there helping out with the ring, and sometimes some shows you weren't. Like so, I can. So I was going to ask you, were you still there when we moved to the second office, or were you had been gone by then?
Um,
North Hollywood office.
I know exactly the office you're talking about. I had trained there a few times at the new
Okay.
office, but I was by and large not there anymore.
Okay.
And I want to say, because now you're actually challenging my memory, that I was wrestling for Rev Pro at the time, Revolution
Oh,
Pro, because I
yeah.
remember that they were kind of working informally with XPW, but I definitely wasn't like doing ring crew and stuff by that point. And I'm not
Oh,
100% sure uh, how that all went down, because there was a point in time where I ended up in Las Vegas training with Nick Bonkwinkle, and Jimmy Snuka was there, but I don't know if he was doing any training, but he was always fun to talk to.
mm,
Not about wrestling, just anything. He's crazy.
yeah.
Cowboy Scott Casey was really the main inspiration, the person
Wow.
I probably spent the most time in the ring with.
Yep.
Um, and that was, God, I remember I wrestled my 21st birthday in Vegas. So, uh, you know, I know by the time I was 20, I was out there, and I know XPW was still running. So
Mm,
there's kind of some crossover there. I may have come back and worked out in North Hollywood a few times after that, but there was a point in time where Supreme had became unable to do the training, and he kind of said, "Look, you pretty much know everything I could teach you at this point. You just need to kind of go out and and I think that what they may have done is they may have thrown me in with the asylum students, and I don't think I just kind of
mm,
felt good about that. And it just there's just like there was no connection.
yeah.
And then so I think that's exactly what happened. It's kind of coming back. So they put me in on Tuesday nights. D was training at that point, so it
Okay.
still was gone, which
Yeah.
was fine. D was really kind of a big part of my training on Tuesday nights. I believe the asylum was on Thursday nights, but with Supreme not being there, and you know the situation just changing so much, and then the other thing that I think really kind of started to be uh, a bone of contention for a lot of people in the asylum group was, there wasn't any like progression between like training or getting on shows. And the reason for that is that we weren't ready to get on shows. But the problem is that you weren't able to wrestle anywhere else because you were part of XPW. So it was like you would train every week and you would learn the fundamentals, but to really get show ready, you needed to be on a show in front of a crowd.
Right.
And in retrospect, there should have been, some effort, I think, because I'm more wise now, uh, to either allow the students to go get onto some indie shows, or work out, some shows with like at least some audience, so that the folks that were training could take that next step to start
Yeah.
developing their character, the persona, how to work a crowd. And without that, we were never going to get onto the XPW shows.
Yeah. That's
And
a good point. Yeah.
so there was this kind of a roadblock, and I kind of saw that, and that's when I was like, I really feel like I've reached a point here where there's nothing else that I can do. And so, being that I was still so strongly associated with the backyard wrestling, I wasn't going to get booked on the SoCal scene, so I just started running my own wrestling shows. And
Right.
so we
Oh,
went back to Ventura. We launched Underground Empire Wrestling 2001,
okay.
and we
Wow.
start. Yeah, we
Long
start.
time ago, man.
Yeah, it
Jeez.
was a long time ago, and I started promoting shows, and some of them we were pulling 300 or 400 people in, and I know that at some point I was even doing that side by side with XPW. So I think what happened was I bought the ring when I was still in XPW. Yeah, and I know that's true because I actually remember measuring the XPW ring
Ah.
because I wanted my ring to be the same size, because it was what I was used to.
Right. Right.
And then I was starting to put shows on, and then I kind of just, as that started to work, I mean, again, not on the XPW level, but it at least was me and the people that I knew being able to go out there and try it in front of an audience and try it in real time, and not just try it in a training facility. And so I did that for a couple years, and actually that is what kind of led me to start getting bookings.
Yeah.
And then that's when I started working up in NorCal and um, around. And then I got invited to go to Vegas for a few shows, and then I decided to go ahead and relocate there and join their school and see if there was more I can learn. I'll tell you this though, it was when I went to Las Vegas and I started training with people who were trained by like Scott Casey and Nick Bonkwinkle and people who are phenomenal trainers, like phenomenal pedigree. And I realized how lucky I was to train with Supreme. I never want to
Oh,
change
wow.
that, because I walked in there and everything that I was doing was standing out immediately among the crowd.
Mm.
And I was 20, so I hadn't been training or around all that long, and these are people that have been wrestling for quite some time.
Mm.
And people were commenting on, oh, he looks so real, he looks so like convincing, and he's
Yeah.
stiff, and he makes you feel everything. And uh I I remember the very first time I got in the ring and I grabbed one of they said, let's get in the ring with this guy and see what you can do. And so I said, okay, locked up with the guy, gave him a headlock, and he moved my arm up and said, hey, line up on the headlock. It's stiff. I looked at him. I said, if you think that's stiff, you haven't felt stiff. You haven't felt anything. And I did. I beat his ass all over the ring.
Yeah.
And then the promoter out there, I think his name was Rush, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, you're wrestling this Friday night. Make sure you have your gear bag. So
Wow.
And
Where were those shows in Vegas? Where were those shows held?
they were at a fixed facility that they had set up for shows behind the Rio. So
Oh,
that's how I knew how to get there. Is I look up in the sky and see that rainbow color building, and I just
yeah.
drive towards it.
The Rio. Yeah.
I swear to God, I wrestled there for over a year, and I got lost every week trying to find the goddamn place. Of course, that was pre-GPS, pre-cell phones, and
Yep.
they can
Yep.
get you anywhere. But I did remember that it was in Chinatown, because I'd always stop off for a pint of green tea ice cream on the way to the show. And then they took this sort of like what the UW arena was, the last one that we had, but it probably half the size. So it's
Okay.
like a garage, and they painted the whole thing black, put in bleachers, kind of like what we did. And then they had a commentary stand set up and hard cams all over the place, and they had a TV show. I mean, they actually had a pretty good
Yeah.
TV show. It aired locally, and that's really kind of where I did a lot of the learning from Nick. I mean,
Right.
he was not in the ring training us, but he did a lot of teaching about psychology. But he also ran all the promos and everything.
Right.
So uh, I just love listening to him speak and learning from him. And then Monday through Thursday, they would do training. So one night, Scott Casey, no, 2 nights, Scott Casey was in charge. This other guy, Mike Lane, trained one night. I didn't go to his classes. I didn't really see the need in it. And then uh, there was someone else. I'm trying to think. It was Scott Casey twice, someone else, and then Nick would always be there on Fridays when we did the shows, and so
Okay.
that's when I would mostly interact with him. But remember Damian Dallas? He was
Yeah.
there, so
Yeah.
I worked shows with him there, and I want to say there's a couple other guys from XPW that may have come through, but he was the one that I mostly remember.
Okay.
But when they did the CAC convention, and I think it was called UWF was still there, like they would do the CAC wrestling show. So we'd get like Pat Patterson
Oh,
would come down, and I met the Elephant Boy because he was, he's back from the '50s. We're going way back now. That was Fabulous Moolah's first,
Great.
the first
Yeah.
guy that she managed.
Damn.
So he was living in Ojai, and he became aware of me because of some of the publicity I got, and he actually was the first person to invite me to the CAC. So like he was in his 80s, but he was still going there every year.
Wow.
And he bought me a plane ticket, and him and I traveled out there, and he introduced me to the Fabulous Moolah and all these old wrestlers. And that's when I met Luthez and spent a ton of time with him and his wife,
Wow.
Charlie. And yeah, it was like incredible. And the thing is like less than 2 years later, almost everyone was dead. And it was
Oh
like,
wow.
so it was like, and then including the Elephant Boy, he passed away. I think by the next time that the CAC came around, he had already passed away. And Luthez probably died 18 months after that, because I stayed in touch with him uh, after meeting him at the CAC. And it was just like, you go to the CAC now and it's mostly just like indie guys. But,
Yeah, it's
you
not.
know,
Yeah, that era is gone. You're right.
yeah, back then it was like still all the people that were like the generation behind the generation that
Right,
I watched growing
right.
up.
Now, yeah, now it's exactly, and it's very interesting, Andre, how you kind of uh, just recently, right there, when you just spoke of Luthez and all these old greats, and the beginning of your story was, look, in large part, hey, this guy's not a traditionalist, he's a backyarder, we're not going to train him, and then here you are learning from, boy, man, some of the all-time great names you can think of from that historic era. Basically, what people would look at as 180 from when they were looking at you, like, oh no, this is not a traditional wrestler, whatever. And it just goes to show that we got so caught up, especially back then. All of us would get so caught up in these labels of that's a backyarder, or that's ECW, that's
Yeah.
XPW, that's this, that, the other. I mean, we were so like we got caught up with that, and forgetting the fact that, look, dude, we're all here doing
Yeah.
the same freaking thing, man.
Yeah.
But it was so easy back then, especially back then when it
Yeah.
was like almost gang mentality. Like,
Yeah.
this is us, that's you, and this is this style, that's that style. Like, I mean, it's in retrospect now. It's like, look at your story right there. Nope, this kid will never know he's a backyarder. We're traditional. That's XPW saying it. Let alone like you're going to
Yeah.
become Luthez later on.
So it's interesting because you brought up a lot of good points there, a lot of things that I want to respond to. First, you got to remember that at the time it was the fad, right? Like we're talking about 1998.
Yeah.
ECW is just peaking. That's why XPW is doing what it's doing. The deathmatch stuff is just kind of started to get a lot of attention in the United States. I was backyard wrestling since I was 8. I remember like making cardboard wrestling belts and all of my friends going into the backyard and we would fight over them. I mean,
Yeah.
I did that literally from the time that I was first watching wrestling until I went to pro wrestling. I mean, that's what the backyard wrestling came from. It was funny to me that all of a sudden it was such a big deal.
Right.
And I'm talking about like we were promoting the shows at my high school,
Right.
cutting promos on during lunch, passing out flyers, and bringing 300 or 400 people to my house, and trying to get
Yeah.
off the one match before the cops showed up. We knew they were coming, and but the other thing is that ESPN started running the golden age of wrestling, like when I was in middle school. And I recorded every episode. I watched it religiously. And even like uh, years after I was a pro wrestler, I would like cajole people in the wrestling business to come to my house, and we would do we called it Luthez night,
Hmm.
but it was like I just pulled out like 10 hours of like my favorite 50s and 60s eras wrestling, and we'd sit there and watch it all night long, eat pizza,
Wow.
and people would get surprised because they would just assume that it was
Yeah.
boring and old. And I always talk about Luthez wrestling Vergania, and I saw them from the first time when I was in middle school, and it was like they did this spot in a match where they kept a head scissors for over 30 minutes. And it was so enthralling. It was like just
Yeah.
watching the psychology of,
Yeah.
trying to break the head scissors and not being successful.
Wow.
And I love that. And the
Yeah.
other thing that I don't think people realize is uh, at the same time that I'm, getting chairs smashed over my head and doing hardcore wrestling, my favorite wrestler is Dean Malenko.
Wow.
Like I
Okay.
loved watching Dean Malenko. To me, he was a wrestler's wrestler. I trained with Tony Cicchini, who was turned on to by Luthez. Luthez told me that there was only 3 people in the world that he believed could fit the title of hooker, and 2 of them are going to be dead soon. And when they died, Tony Cicchini's going to be the only guy. So I started flying to Chicago to learn hooking in catch
Wow.
wrestling from Tony Cicchini, who is still teaching, but that guy's incredible. And because his trainer was Stanley Rodvon, who was an old Cincinnati wrestler from the era, the golden age, and actually pre-golden age. And he got so many stories about all the wrestlers from that era. So I'd go out to Chicago. He'd stretch the hell out of me, teach me all these catch holds and these hooking moves, and then we'd go sit on his house on his back porch and talk old. And he wasn't even like in the business, but he just like knew so many of the stories, and like there was things that stories that I heard that he had known and knew more about it. And so those were like incredible experiences. So uh, it's funny because I think people assume that I just like if given the opportunity, I'd watch deathmatch wrestling all
Yeah.
day long, and I'm not even that interested in deathmatch wrestling. I don't even think it's that entertaining. I did it because I could,
Right.
because it was like I don't mind getting hit legit with a fucking bat. I just don't care. Um, but if
And
we wanted,
when you were younger too, again, this was you were trained by Supreme. He became a very important fixture in your life, and it kind of just it was just organic for you to kind of go down that road with him in a way. Yes.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, that was one of the motivating factors for me to go to Vegas, because I would talk to promoters and I'd say, "Hey, I just want to do a regular." Oh, no, 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 no. We want you to do the hardcore stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, I really, really, really want to do. I was learning submission wrestling. I wanted to go learn. I wanted to go see if I could work some of the, the double wrist lock, the top wrist locks,
Right.
the the holds that I was learning from Tony. If I could implement that into matches, and just people
Right.
there weren't interested in it. And it's funny because I went to Vegas. That was a family show. You weren't
Yeah.
allowed to cuss. You weren't allowed to bleed. I did once, and then I accidentally bled all over the front row, and that didn't work out very well. Super, super bloody. Uh, I took a whole packet of that BC powder right before the show, and apparently my blood was a lot more thinner than I was
Oh, no.
realizing. Uh, so it was like I was in an environment where I had to get over on my ability to wrestle.
Yeah.
And I was known there for stretching guys. Like that's what I mean, Funny Bone, him and I had a feud going there. That was the obvious matchup. Even if we weren't allowed to, do a bunch of weapons and stuff. He's a tough guy. I'm a tough guy. I think anybody would have saw that one and put us together. Um, but he would tell guys when they would watch the submission hold. He's a little bit stiff on those, but he's a good worker. He won't hurt you, but you will be sore the next day. And I was still able to like use the toughness Supreme taught me, because I still
Yeah.
clotheslined the shit out of people. I still took hard bumps. I bump on the concrete every week, and that didn't get me over. But in the end, it was an opportunity for me to get in the ring and use a lot of the wrestling that I was taught by Supreme and D and all the others, and Joey, and not be a hardcore wrestler. And then when I came back, it wasn't quite so hard to kind of get promoters to listen to me if I, wanted to. But it was still like, if there was going to be a hardcore wrestling show, like it was expected I was going to be there, and so it wasn't like it was totally gone. But I don't think that that's where my heart would have been if I would have stayed in wrestling. Long term as a profession. I really wanted to be more like Dean Malenko than Cactus Jack, even though I did love Cactus Jack.
Yeah,
I
you
love,
did love Cactus Jack.
yeah, I did, and I think even still when I'm in the courtroom doing a closing argument, sometimes I trigger a little bit of Cactus Jack. It comes out.
I love it. I love that. I love that, man. I don't know if the courtroom will allow it, but I think we would all love to see footage of that, you in court channeling Cactus Jack. But no, Andre, hey, look, I to a degree, to a point, I remember, whether from you or from somebody else, hearing like a little bit of what you just said. um, oh, Andre's not all about hardcore wrestling. Okay, you did like a little bit of the tradition. I think I maybe heard that, not to this degree. So I think that if I'm sitting here, like, for the most part, wow, this is would never expected this. As you were talking, it began to feel a little familiar, but not much. So those that know you, Suicide, Lone Star, you have a Lone Star, Supreme's linkage, like, this is very interesting. And yeah, thanks for sharing, man.
Yeah,
And
I remember somebody, and I've heard this a couple of times. I remember this, like, God, I don't remember who it was. I can kind of picture the face, but I was. It was actually one of Kevin's shows, the SCCW shows. Remember the
yeah,
deathmatch tournament shows he was doing?
oh five.
And yeah, exactly. And so I was in the ring hours and hours before the show, training some of the kids, and I was showing them some of the stuff that Tony was teaching me,
Okay.
and showing them some of the, we were working it into what I was trying to show them was in a pro wrestling match, we can start the match more like what you would see like in a high school match, work in some shoot submission holds, and then transition that naturally into like a traditional pro wrestling match. And one of the guys comes and says, "Hey, Andre, come here." So walk over and he says, "Dude, what the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like he's mad, and I'm like, I don't get it, because at this point I'm still sort of kind of young, right? Like I've been
Yeah.
around the business for 4 or 5
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
but and this is a guy who's been around, and he's like pissed, and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, do you not want us in the ring?" Like I'm thinking he's mad that we're like in the ring, and it's like 4 or 5 hours before anyone's going to show up, because actually it was my ring, so we had to go put it up.
Huh.
He's like, "No, I refuse to watch you wrestle because I think what you do is garbage." And he's like, "And I'm watching you do things that I think is phenomenal. Why don't I see this on shows?"
Oh
And
wow.
I'm just like, "Because people don't want to book me for that. They
Yeah.
don't know me as that. They don't want to
Typecast.
see that." Yeah. And he's just like, "You're fucking amazing. Like, you know your shit." And one of the biggest compliments I got, he's crazy anyway, but I remember Jarrell brought down uh, Teddy Hart to the school, and I didn't even know that he or Teddy was coming. And I was, at that point, I actually had a catch wrestling class where I would actually have some of the kids come in, and we would just do straight catch wrestling for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so we were training, and I knew that they were there, but I didn't even say hi to them. And I knew Teddy from the WSX taping,
Right.
but I didn't really I don't say didn't get along with him, but he was a little bit eccentric, and I kind of
Yeah.
stayed away from him. And that's kind of like when he showed up. I mean, I didn't have a problem with him being at my school, but it's just like I wasn't going to drop everything and go talk to him.
Right.
And at the end, he stood up and he said, "I hope you guys realize how lucky you are, because I'm seeing this kid teach things I used to watch my grandfather teach people."
Whoa.
And he's like, "And I haven't seen that stuff since my grandfather
Wow.
was teaching it." And he's like, "Andre, I always knew you as a talented guy for going there and doing tough matches." He says, "But my respect level for you has gone way up." And him and I have been friends ever since. When he's around, I haven't heard from him in a couple of years, and
Wow.
he's
Yeah.
he's here and then he isn't.
Sure.
But to me, that was a huge compliment, because uh,
Wow.
and it was a huge validation for what Tony
Yeah.
was teaching me, because
Oh
now
my
I'm hearing
God.
that Tony's teaching me the same things that Stu Hart is
Yeah.
using on folks. So
And who can argue that now? Let's say you and Teddy are in the room, and he says that about his own grandfather,
yeah,
the old Stu Hart. Who the hell is going to argue that now? And you're right. That validation's got to be
yeah.
it's got to be so valuable, man.
And he
And
and I weren't friends at the time, so like
yeah,
I remember him
right.
saying to me later, like, "Hey, I know I was kind of a dick back in the WSX days. I've grown up." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's cool." I think we all go through that period. But yeah, I mean, to me, it was just shocking, because he just stood up. And he was just telling my students, like, "You guys are fucking lucky." He's like, "You're lucky. You're lucky that this guy is opened up this wrestling school, allows you guys to come down here, teach, and is passing on this knowledge to you. And you guys really should absorb it all." So yeah, it was cool.
I can't get over again the contrast of how crazy it is when we label certain things and then of course get typecast. And in wrestling, look at this. This is a great example. This is probably maybe one of the greatest examples, not only in XPW, but in just in wrestling, as somebody that came in completely not only looked at in the world of XPW was looked at
Yeah,
right.
cleared up.
And ends up being more of a Dynamite D than anybody else that was in let's say XPW with the Luthezes and again the Dean Malenkos, the Stu Harts that you brought up and how that incorporated with what you love and watching 50s wrestling. But we all need to start somewhere, man. And that's basically what happens. Look at, man, everybody that was in XPW when it started, we weren't all necessarily like hardcore wrestling fans. We were just people that loved pro wrestling, but that was the vehicle.
And that was the fat at the time. I mean, I don't think
it was the fat at the time, and wrestling was so hot, like you said.
Yeah,
we had not gonna sugarcoat this. We had tremendous advantage for starting during that era in 1999, late 90s. But no, we were not all like, okay, these are all just people that love Japanese hardcore wrestling or ECW. No. We were just pro wrestling. What's the vehicle? XPW. We're gonna get behind that, man.
Yeah.
We're gonna defend that to the end, and we all just ended up doing that, becoming that. We all became that in a way.
Yeah, because you could wrestle in front of thousands of people, and if you're given that opportunity to do what you love in front of thousands of people, and the thing is a couple things. First of all, XPW wasn't all deathmatch wrestling. There's a lot of really good wrestling there.
I'm talking about the perception.
The perception, yeah.
Perception, yeah.
And talking about perceptions, I mean, it's across the board. Like Supreme is a good wrestler.
Yeah.
Not just a good deathmatch wrestler. He's a good wrestler.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys are good shooters.
They have to be.
Yeah. You do have to be. You do have to be. And the thing is that, I mean, and that's kind of, in the early days when I was doing deathmatch wrestling, like I used to like to do the matches where we'd go 45 minutes or go 30 minutes, but only the last 5 minutes even had blood in it or any weapon. Right. So we would, and I'm not talking about XPW, I'm talking about when I was doing the UW shows and the indie shows, is when they would have us do the death matches. I would always, we always talked about how we're going to do the deathmatch wrestling match one day where we never use anything. We're going to really fuck the fans over by not bleeding, not doing any weapons, just to do a straight wrestling match. I don't think we ever did it though, but then you get lazy and then, you get out of shape and then you have to be lazy. And I think that's sort of kind of like what really I saw like kind of drive me from not wanting to do that anymore, because it got to the point where like people just got in there and did exactly what they're criticized for doing. And that's just hitting each other with shit.
Right.
And, that doesn't take talent, and it doesn't, I mean, deathmatch wrestling with psychology, the way that I saw many of the XPW guys do it was entertaining.
Right.
Like watching Supreme and Kaos do, and I don't want to say a death match, but a match with like, things in it that would cause blood and violence. It still had all of the elements of a pro wrestling match. And
right.
I wrote to Jim Cornette once about this, and he actually ended up reading my letter on his program. And because he was always trashing deathmatch wrestling.
Right.
And I don't remember exactly what was said that bothered me, but I wrote him a letter and I said, hey, look, you can't put Cactus Jack and Terry Funk in the same boat as a lot of these other guys that you're shitting on all the time. Because if you go watch a Cactus Jack death match, it's a wrestling match.
Yep.
It's a story. They sell, they build up the things. And in the end, they put on a quote death match that gets people to ooh and awe that they could put on 300 nights a year if they had to.
Exactly.
That's not the case with some of the shit that developed from, the XPWs and that movement. Right. So that was kind of why I was kind of resisting more and more the deathmatch wrestling, because I just didn't want to be in a match where we were just picking up things and smashing each other until it was time to do one move and go home.
Right.
So, So, you know, a lot of those criticisms that I used to hear about, like, oh, these guys are just no talent, fat slobs. Well, Ian Rotten is a good wrestler,
Yeah.
but they sometimes, I think, allow people to lose sight of those things when their deathmatch wrestling matches. I'm not talking about Ian Rotten directly. I'm just talking about uh, deathmatch wrestlers when they even if they have the ability to put on a good wrestling match, they forget the things that make them a wrestler, and they just go in there and just beat each other with things with no
Yeah.
concept of telling a story or making things
Violence
make
for the sake,
sense.
violence for the sake of violence. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not going to say that I didn't get in situations where I was
Yeah.
doing the same thing, but it's like sometimes it's like when you're working with a certain person, there ain't much you can do. You just got to kind of
Right.
roll with it. But
Yeah, 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 of course. But at the end of the day, you're talking to us now about your philosophy and your mindset, and that that wasn't the core of what your view of professional wrestling and why you liked it and why you got involved in it
absolutely,
was. No, man, I learned a lot today, and like I said, you got to be one of, if not, I mean, it's cool that you even wrote and got a response from Jim Cornette, and who better than you know, to be that like representative for it, and kind of like in a way that you're the representative, not only speaking for yourself, but you're who else to speak for Supreme
yeah,
in that vein. That he's gone now, you know, and you're right, he did a lot, not only for you, like in the training, but he just did a lot to uh, bring awareness, bring exposure to this. And like you said, he could wrestle. So
yeah,
if you really look at some of his matches, doing the drop toe holds and the cross faces, and yeah, he could wrestle, man, like for sure.
yeah.
So um,
And it wasn't just me.
no, I know that.
I love saying that Supreme was my trainer, and I was his first student. And I think there was probably quite a big gap between me and when he started getting involved in it. But
Right.
toward there's dozens and dozens and dozen people that will line up now and say Supreme made a huge impression in my wrestling career, and I think it's fantastic. I think that. I remember thinking when I was younger that it was unfortunate that it's as fortunate it was for me to have gained all of the knowledge and spent all the time with Supreme. I was kind of sad that it was like I was the only one, and so for years later, for him to get involved with Joey and Santino's to do
Yeah.
everything that it's done, and for him to be a part of that and to influence and affect other people like that, I think is fantastic because he really is an incredible human being. Him
Yeah.
and Joey, I have those are two
Right.
people that I just can't say enough good things about.
For sure. Shout out to Santino brothers. Good work that they're doing there. And yeah, man. But I was there, man. I was there when he literally took you and under his wing, literally
Yeah,
took you and grabbed you, and you were happy to oblige. You know, Andre, we could probably you could definitely talk for a whole nother hour. That's for sure, man. But this has been great, man. This has been cool catching up with you. Before we go though, man, really, man, it's been cool catching up with you, dude. We haven't, like you said, we haven't spoken in a while, and this has been great, dude. We worked and again, like you mentioned, of course, XPW. Then we crossed paths again in Wrestling Society X, and
yeah.
throughout the years. So it's been good catching up with you here. Um, but um, any shout outs, any plugs, or anything like that before I get to my last question?
Well, all I'll say is that if you want to be a wrestler, Santino's the place to go
Okay, cool.
because that's the obviously I'm not a
Right
part of
on.
the school, but that's my origins, and so I
Okay,
all
cool.
love and respect to them.
All right, and then last question in your mind, Andre, what do you think? What is the legacy of XPW?
I think the legacy of XPW is the people that uh, were in California doing pro wrestling before XPW came around, and that when XPW got started, uh, it was big because Raw Black created a a place for people who liked ECW and hardcore wrestling could come see the ECW guys, right? I think to me, and when I look back about and think about XPW and what it did and why it was special, I don't think it was special for the reasons that it became initially like popular, right? Because when people would go to the XPW or the XPW shows, they would want to see a lot of the people that they were familiar with from ECW. But
Right.
it didn't take very long at all before XPW became about homeless Jimmy falling out of the rafters of the LA Sports Arena, or
Right.
Supreme and uh, uh, Messiah doing suplexes off the top rope to the concrete floor.
Yeah.
Uh, Chaos and Carlito and even Rob Black, who I think became one of the biggest stars on the show. And I think all of those guys end up outshining and outperforming the people that were flown in. And
Yeah.
these are the names that really were needed to make XPW recognized in the beginning. But
Yes.
those folks, the people that really became the heart and soul of XPW, were the guys who were here in California before XPW started, became the heart and soul of that company. And then every one of those guys that left XPW and went into other directions, they were known as the XPW guy. Like when Supreme, you know, 5-10 years later was doing shows, Supreme was known as Supreme from XPW.
Right.
D was D from XPW. All of these guys were the guy, homeless Jimmy from XPW,
Right.
Kris Kloss from
Yeah.
XPW.
Right.
Like
All of us.
it's synonymous. And so if I was to sit here and think about the legacy of what is XPW, it's going to be all those guys from Southern California wrestling that use that platform to really etch out a place for themselves in the history of Southern California wrestling that really didn't exist after uh, uh, what's their name? The Labels. You remember
Yeah. Right.
they used to
Yeah.
run the Grand
LA
Ole
territory.
Auditorium. Yeah, and that was a phenomenal territory. And like I love reading books and articles, and I've been doing a collection of uh, newspaper articles. Well, I've been trying to go through all the archives and pull all the articles from those shows because
Hmm.
I'm trying to do like I don't know what the purpose is eventually going to be, but wrestling used to be banned in California,
Right.
and it was legalized through a proposition initiative. And before that, there was a
What
lot
year?
of
What year?
oh, it was in the 20s or 30s, so it was
Wow.
a long time ago.
No way.
And, but I found a bunch of articles where they were like raiding and shutting down boxing and wrestling shows because it was illegal back then. And then there was the initiative to legalize it. And so I've been, collecting a lot of that stuff because I don't know if I'm going to write an article, but I want to do something with it. And it's just, it was incredible to read about uh, the WWA shows the LaBelle family used to run, and people talk about how like you'd be at the Grand Olympic Auditorium, and the culture was like so crazy and out of control and violent, and like you never knew if a riot was going to break out. And then you think about XPW, and it kind of just fits into that mold.
Yeah.
And uh, I I know I kind of got off track from the question, but I think it all rolls together. To me, uh, California is a hard place in modern times to run wrestling. It's a hard
Hmm.
place to draw a
Yeah.
crowd, but it does have a history.
Yeah.
And really, to me, the history of Southern California wrestling is the LaBelle Wrestling promotion. And I'm talking about Southern California wrestling. I'm talking about like the San Francisco, the Cow Palace
Mhm.
wrestling. But here, it's WWA and it's XPW. Like those
Yeah.
are the two promotions that really, I think, define what Southern California wrestling is. And there's a lot more links. And I think a lot of people will be surprised by this. You think about Fred Blassie, who was one of the biggest stars in Los Angeles. And think about what Fred Blassie was. He was known
Yeah.
as the vampire. He would literally file down his teeth and open up people's foreheads in the
Yeah.
middle of the ring and let them bleed all over the ring in LA.
Yeah.
You know, this is the guy who went to other wrestling promotions and they would say, we don't want your shit here. And he's like, I don't give a fuck what you want. This is what I do. I get in the ring and I kick people's ass and I bloody them.
And I'm sorry, and look at, do you remember like the Guerreros and Roddy Piper and
yes,
and singing La Cucaracha as the Mexican national anthem, and then you look at Rob Black, would he come in the ring and say all this stuff about the Mexican, like, there's linkage. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
And what's incredible about that is I don't think that Rob Black was ripping off. I don't even know that Rob Black even knew about those angles and storylines.
Not at all.
But
not at all.
There's just so much there that, like, when you read about it, when you read about the history of Southern California wrestling prior to it going dead here in the 90s, really. I know the promotion was still around, but really by the 90s it was dead.
Yeah.
And you look at, you know, going back to when Blassie was here and the wrestling that was happening here, and then XPW is like, there's a lot of correlations. And so I guess that's the legacy. The legacy is the folks that really use that platform to solidify themselves, to solidify a culture of Southern California wrestling as being a very unpredictable, wild punk rock in a way. Remember, we had a lot of the punk rock guys, the Rancid, hanging around the XPW shows, and Tiger Army and all those guys. And that's, I guess, what to me the legacy is. It's the idea that wrestling doesn't have to be clean. It can be crazy, wild, out of control, but it's still wrestling.
Right.
And I think that it will be remembered for many decades from now. Just like, you know, for real wrestling historians, just the way that LA wrestling was remembered prior to XPW. I think XPW, whether at the time, I know it had a lot of naysayers and a lot of people that loved it. I mean, there was like people on both sides, but I think that history will look back fondly on XPW.
Fascinating take on it. And this has been definitely a fascinating interview, and good to see you, my friend. Thank you for being on Xtreme Memories. And once again, You Suicide, Lone Star, Evil Lone Star, the guy who created Underground Empire Wrestling, UEW. And man, we hope.
I'll tell you one thing. I had a conversation with a phenomenal, like, renowned trial lawyer, and he watched me do a trial and I won it. And he said to me, all those years you spent in pro wrestling, do you think that had any impact on how you try cases? And I said, it has every impact on it, because it's the same thing. Like, you come in and you're playing a character, and you put your costume on, which is, for me, is a suit. And then, you know, you got to play the crowd. You got to you got to talk to the jury. And I speak to them with inflections, and I really try to bring them through the story the same way I did as a wrestler. And I think what makes such a great lawyer. So from all the things you just mentioned to now doing criminal defense and civil rights litigation.
That is fascinating. I want to end, but, you know, Jesse Ventura said the same thing about governing. You know, pro wrestling helped him with that. I don't share this much, but I'm an auctioneer now. I'm a charity, I do benefit charity events for all sorts of charities, and it's that psychology.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And so I hear what you're saying, and I heard everything you said, and this was, again, a great interview. Andre, good seeing you again, my friend.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it wouldn't be complete without you, man. And thanks for being on here. And thank you, fans, for checking this out. Once again, new episodes on the 15th and the 30th. Xtreme Memories. Subscribe to the Wrestling Chatter. Thank you, Andre. Folks, we will see you next time.
Thank you for watching Xtreme Memories, hosted by Kris Kloss. He's dropping new episodes every month on the 15th and 30th. You can be the first to tune in by subscribing to the Wrestling Chatter channel right here on YouTube. See you next time.